Wisdom Teachings, and I'm your host, David Wilcock. Were there clues to a worldwide ascension event planted into the holy book of the Islamic faith, the Quran? Do these clues actually line up very nicely with what we've been hearing from many other prophetic traditions as described on this show? What is the origin of Islam? Where did it come from? Was there some sort of being talking to Prophet Muhammad? And is there a connection that we could find to all of this in the Law of One? Are there any clues that can shed light on this mystery? I can't wait to share this with you, because if you think that the Quran is only something that's negative and used for terrorism and jihad, you would be totally mistaken. This is a very fascinating subject because a lot of people have made pre-described conclusions about the Quran based on an incredible amount of Western mass media brainwashing. We've never really dealt with the fact of what Islam is, and if you actually break away from the propaganda and read the Quran, it's actually really cool. There's a lot of it that really resonates and sounds like a typically good quality channeled book with a lot of nice, uplifting, spiritual stuff in it. And some people actually did practice the teachings of the Quran and reach light body. That would be the Sufis, okay? Sufism is essentially an Islamic mystery school that heavily bases itself on the Quran and some other texts. And many of the Sufis apparently actually did achieve light body. So where did this come from? Where did the Quran come from? That's a really curious question, because all we usually get is this radicalized version of it that's totally wrong. The Law of One only spoke about this once, is the same basic land where Islam now rules. So in the 18th dynasty, as is known in your records of space-time distortions, we were able to contact a pharaoh, we meaning Ra, as you would call him. The man was small in life experience on your plane and was what you would call a wanderer or ET soul. Thus, this mind-body-spirit complex, that just means person, but they have a much deeper level of understanding of what a person is. Thus, this person received our communication distortions and was able to blend his distortions, his light, his understandings with our own. So they made telepathic contact with this guy. This young entity had been given a vibratory complex of sound, which would be a name, which vibrated in honor of a prosperous god, as this mind-body complex, which we would call instrument for convenience, that's Carla, the instrument is Carla, the woman doing the channeling, would call Amun. Okay, so that was his original name. His original name was Amun. The entity decided that this name, being in honor of only one among many gods, was not acceptable for inclusion in his vibratory sound complex, meaning his name. Thus, he changed his name to one which honored the sun disk, and that would be the sun and, of course, the flying saucers as well. This distortion, called Aten, was a close distortion to our reality as we understand our own nature of mind-body-spirit complex distortion. However, it does not come totally into alignment with the intended teach-learning which was sent. They didn't want him to name himself after the sun. This entity, Akhenaten, that's how the two come together, Akhenaten, becomes convinced, well actually no, it's Amun, so that's an important point. The original name was Amun. Aten is the sun disk, Akhen is the extra additive that goes on there, but he was named himself after the sun, which they say it's not exactly what we wanted, but it was close. This entity, Akhenaten, became convinced that the vibration of one was the true spiritual vibration, extra additive that goes on there, but he was named himself after the sun, which they say it's not exactly what we wanted, but it was close. This entity, Akhenaten, became convinced that the vibration of one was the true spiritual vibration and thus decreed the law of one. So that means that he became their instrument, he became their messenger for the Egyptians. However, this entity's beliefs of the law of one were accepted by very few. His priests only gave lip service but did not have a spiritual distortion towards seeking the truth. The peoples continued along in their normal beliefs, which is sad for them. When this entity, Akhenaten, was no longer in third density, again, meaning he left, he died, again the polarized beliefs in many gods came into their own and continued along that way until the one known as Muhammad delivered the peoples of Egypt in that area into a more intelligible distortion of mind-body-spirit relationships. Now, isn't that weird and intricate? It doesn't really say, yes, we're endorsing Islam. It's just saying that we talked to somebody, Akhenaten, he gave our message to a certain degree. The priests didn't really get it. Most people didn't really hear what we were saying, that you're all one, there is only love, all this kind of stuff. And then immediately after Akhenaten leaves, it becomes pantheistic once again. Multiple gods are worshipped as if they are God, and different people will pick one of those gods, like he had done originally with his name Amun, right? His parents had done that. And they'll worship that one god, and they'll act like that's it. And Akhenaten is trying to say, no, all these beings, they might be higher level beings, but they're not God. There's only one true cosmic oneness, and it's all one identity, and we're all connected to it. So this area of the Middle East, if you will, this is a separate part than what happens up in Israel area with obviously Jerusalem, Bethlehem, all that kind of stuff. We're now talking about the Arabic parts of the Middle East. That those Arabic parts of the Middle East, Christianity didn't really settle in there, so it wasn't until Muhammad was contacted that they got a more intelligible version of how the Law of One really works, a more intelligible version of mind-body-spirit relationships, meaning how are we really interrelated, how are we really one? So if you've ever seen the ancient astronaut theorists, the ancient aliens type of shows about Islam, a lot of great scholarship has been done on this. We know that Muhammad reported seeing a very large craft that was coming down, and there was a being that was coming out of this craft and contacting him and speaking to him directly. Now, Muhammad said that this being was Archangel Gabriel. Now, why did he think that the being was Archangel Gabriel? Apparently, Archangel Gabriel, according to certain disciplines, has bird-like humanoid features. So if you're thinking what I'm thinking, then I think we're on the same page here, which is this very likely was another manifestation of the blue avians or Ra. Archangel Gabriel is bird-like, and there are certain places where you can do that research and hear that, in fact, Archangel Gabriel is very similar to like what we'd hear of as Horus. And when Ra contacted Corey, and obviously that happened as a direct result of my being a scholar of the Law of One, already having this public platform, there was way too much stuff that they were telling Corey that he didn't know, because he still has only barely read the first book of the Law of One, didn't remember a lot of it. So I'd forgotten about them mentioning inner earth beings, for one example, but then I go back and I find out it's there, and there's been dozens and dozens of those kind of things. So I really do think that this is all part of one unified cosmology, that there is this higher level to the universe where there are extraterrestrials up there at various grades, and they told Corey that they tried 3 other times before working with him to get this to work. And they didn't say what those 3 other times were, but obviously they mention in the Law of One Akhenaten directly. They don't mention whether they contacted Muhammad or not, but it's sort of implied when they say, until the one known as Muhammad delivered the peoples into a more intelligible distortion of mind-body-spirit relationships. So they might have been embarrassed. Maybe they didn't want to say it because, of course, after Islam was founded, it fractures into 2 sects right away. After Muhammad's death, there's the Shia and the Sunni, or the Shiites and Sunnites. And they're at war with each other. They don't like each other. And it gets down to his kids and who gets to inherit the power of their religious faith. And so this still is going on to this day. These sects are still warring with each other. But we have reason to believe, again, they imply that they actually spoke to him, and once you put the pieces together, it probably was. Archangel Gabriel was probably Ra, and remember now that Muhammad was illiterate, so his wife actually was writing down what he was hearing, and he was very likely channeling what they had to say. So a lot of the Quran actually sounds like the Law of One, but the problem, of course, is there are certain passages that are a function of his own personality, in my opinion, or would otherwise be kind of not necessarily what we would think of as being good. There are certain. So I like most of the Quran, but there are certain things, just like there are in the Bible, where you could look at that and you could double click on it and then make it into something bad, like this idea of a holy war. Okay, that can be way taken out of context. But if you actually get in there, there's some amazing stuff. And what I find most amazing is the teachings about a solar flash. If this was Ra speaking to Muhammad, they got even more specific about what's going to happen and what it will do, even than we see in most of the stuff in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Jesus was speaking in parables, but for some reason, when it goes over to Muhammad, it's not parables. They're just telling you flat out what's going to happen. And it's even more specific than what you see in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So again, nothing is perfect. I'm not going to ever endorse one religion, but we really need to revisit this. So there is a book now in which they've taken the original Quran and they've sort of modernized the translation so it reads more smoothly. And it's called A Meditation on the Holy Quran. So that's what I'm going to be quoting from. It's just another way of reading and translating it. So they talk all the time about this Day of Atonement, and this most likely was Ra speaking to Muhammad. So let's take a look at what it actually says. When time suddenly disappears in the eternal moment of illumination, the brightness of the heavenly orbs will be split open and dissolved into transparent light. That's a lot of stuff right there. So they're talking about time coming to an end, when time suddenly disappears. And that is consistent with other things that we saw in, like, for example, the book of Corinthians, where he talks about that the change will occur in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. There's a passage in 2 Peter 13, where he's talking about that time comes to an end, that the change will occur in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. There's a passage in 2 Peter 13, where he's talking about that time comes to an end. It is the end of time as we know it. Time does some kind of shift. That does appear to be part of the solar flash. I've discussed that scientifically before. The idea that the metric of time, the flow of time, changes as we go into this new galactic energy zone. So they say there's an eternal moment of illumination. So even though the solar flash only takes place for a particular moment, there is eternity in that moment. And this is very interesting too, because the people in the Montauk Project, when they would go into that Montauk chair and they'd portal into the future, when they hit around the end of the year 2012, they would experience what they called the full out. And that would be an experience where they have cosmic consciousness. They could be as large as the galaxy or as small as a subatomic particle. And they have this omniscient awareness, this omniscient intelligence. So just imagine what it would be like flying through this tube of light, a Stargate portal. You hit this wall of white light, and all of a sudden, you are in total cosmic ecstasy. And then after you go through that, anything they saw after that was very subjective and seemed to be only dependent upon the individual, not dependent upon anything else. So that's a really important point. And here, the Quran references that idea that it becomes an eternal moment of illumination, eternity encapsulated in a moment. And then it says the brightness of the heavenly orbs will be split open. Let's just stop on that for a second. That's the solar flash. The heavenly orb is the sun. The brightness will split open. It's talking about the sun releasing brightness and dissolve into transparent light. It's some kind of mystery. It's a light that is not visible. It's a transparent light. It's the fourth density activation. It's a energetic change. The most popular religious text in the world. There's over 1 billion people reading this, and they read this every time they go through the Quran. They're expecting this to happen. They're anticipating the solar flash, just like many other religions do. So it's really incredible once you get your hands dirty and actually find out what it says. But there's more to it. Let's keep reading. Those who fail to live in constant expectation of the mystic day, those who regard this teaching as myth or imagination, will be severely disappointed when the last day actually arrives and they are not spiritually prepared. Well, that's about as plain speaking as it can be made. You want to spiritually prepare yourself for this. You don't want to blindly crash through life being motivated by things like greed, jealousy, and fear, when you have the possibility that this might be real. Now again, I'm not saying you have to believe it, okay? You can choose on your own free will whether you want to believe this or not, but I'm showing you connective threads that link together every single major spiritual tradition we've ever seen on earth. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Greek philosophy, Roman philosophy, Zoroastrianism. It goes on and on and on, and everybody's saying the same stuff once you decipher it. So do you really think nothing's going to happen? And here, the message that was given through the New Testament is clarified a little bit because it didn't really get as specific. They saw actually what it turned into. The New Testament had already been made into a thing by 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, so now they got a few more hundred years, and they come back and they make a few tweaks, a few edits through Muhammad, and they say, you know what, if you don't actually prepare for this thing, if you're not expecting it to happen, you're going to be really disappointed when it does. Because, oh man, now I actually prepare for this thing. If you're not expecting it to happen, you're going to be really disappointed when it does. Because, oh man, now I got to do 25,000 more years of third density. That's like a prison sentence. So you don't want to get stuck that way. So it's a really good idea to meditate. That's what they keep telling us over and over again. Cultivate peace of mind. Cultivate a satisfactory life for yourself where you're not constantly running around in stress and anger and fear and depression and pain. Do what you can to clean those things up. Do what you can to not be so busy, to try to have a more peaceful and relaxing life. That's really, really important because you could get totally captivated by the vibrational changes and not really see where this is going or how you fit into the greater picture of what is occurring here on Earth. And that's very important. You want to be included in this big cosmic harvest event, as it's called in the Law of One. You definitely, I would think, you would definitely want to be part of that, especially if you're a Gaia subscriber and you're interested enough in this to be a regular on this show. Yeah, definitely you want to be nice because it's telling you this is going to happen whether you believe it or not. So let's keep reading. There's more to it here. So this just is a citation now, so you can see it's the Meditation on the Holy Quran, which is their translation, modern translation, and it's chapter 77, verse 8 and verse 15. That's where you can go find this. It's right in there. There's other references to it as well. Here's one that I really like. Upon the mysterious day when time ends, all manifest being will tremble at the first thundering blast of divine resonance that will utterly stop the world. Wow. So notice that if you go back to the Hindu tradition, they actually talk about how the Samvartaka fire, this release from the sun, is the embodiment of how the Samvartaka fire, this release from the sun, is the embodiment of the Creator. It is the Creator's soul, if you will, coming out of the sun, spreading out into the solar system. It's the living light. And now what they're saying is, again, time ends and there's a thundering blast of divine resonance. So yes, physically it might look like light. It probably does look like a big flash, just as it's predicted in so many of these traditions, including the Bible. But then it also says it will stop the world. Now you have to kind of think about that, and what does that mean? I believe that's saying that it's as if all activity as we know it stops. It's as if time has suddenly stopped and we're in a slipstream. So things are not just going to be moving around normally and bustling. It's as if like you're in some kind of frozen stop motion and wow, what the heck is going on? There's some dimensional shift. There's some sudden, absolutely undeniable, totally discontinuous consciousness change. And that's what it's saying. Time ends. Time seems to come to a stop. And there's a blast of divine resonance. Something happens from the sun. They're calling it transparent light, but there does appear to be a visible component to it as well. Now let's continue and see what it says. This momentary terror, because it is going to be frightening when it first happens, will disappear when each soul realizes its spiritual body to be perfect, limitless, and holy. And this is now chapter 79, verses 6 and 13. So once again, it's as if somebody came in and did a rewrite and made it a little bit clearer. This is not a parable, it's not a metaphor, it's saying that there's a thundering blast of divine resonance and that you'll be terrified at first because it seems like time has come to a stop, But that momentary terror is dissipated when you realize that your soul is perfect, limitless, and holy in telling us exactly what to expect when this solar flash takes place. And that's really actually quite exciting. So then there's another one where they talk about the day of truth. You must come to know with absolute certitude that from above your conscious being, as stars above the earth, there gaze angelic protectors. Well, that would make sense because according to that brief reference in the Law of One, those angelic protectors were speaking in the making of the Quran, Archangel Gabriel, and there was some kind of craft. So they want you to be absolutely certain, without any doubt, that there are angelic protectors. And in the New Testament, they talk about the harvest is the end of the world, the reapers are the angels. Same thing. Let's continue. Upon pages of light in the invisible book of your life, which will become visible on the day of truth, these heavenly beings record all your actions and reactions. Even the most secret motivations they perceive and transcribe with perfect clarity. And that's chapter 82, verses 10 through 12. So once again, they're talking about a day of truth. They're saying, know with absolute certainty that these beings exist. There is a book of life. There is a kind of divine record of how much progress you've made spiritually. And no matter how you think that you could get away with anything, even the most secret motivations hidden deep in the recesses of your mind, even if it's subconscious, and you're not usually aware of your own motivations, they know. And so again, everything is totally exposed. You don't get to hide from anything. And that's, again, the law of karma. It's all out in the open. These higher beings can see that, and so that's why you want to try to meditate and be as pure and as peaceful and as loving as you can, because if this thing is really going to happen within the next few years, definitely you don't want to miss the train, so to speak. Because if this thing is really going to happen within the next few years, definitely you don't want to miss the train, so to speak. You want to be ready with your boarding passes. Now they talk about the day of enlightenment. When the day of enlightenment dawns, this again is the solar flash, the soul, which is now expressing itself as a luminous body, that's obviously new, your soul is now lighting up, the face of its being suffused with calm joy, you now awaken into the supernal garden of divine presence. That sounds pretty awesome. Overwhelmed to comprehend at last the full significance of your own spiritual commitment. And this is in the Quran, chapter 88, verses 1 through 5. The day of enlightenment, where the soul becomes a luminous body, you awaken into a divine presence, and you finally learn the significance of all of the spiritual commitments that you've made. You learn that all of these things, all these tests, all these trials, all this trying to be more humble, trying to not let your ego control you, trying to be a good person, trying to be forgiving, trying to be compassionate, to be honorable, to step up, to be fearless, do the right thing, not be backing down, but to actually have that courageousness, to be a force for good, a loving presence, all of that stuff that you've been working on, all that stuff that really matters in the spiritual sense, it actually now, once this flash occurs, wow, okay, there was a reason for me to be doing my homework. There was a reason for me to be so focused on what really needs to take place here. And now I get it. Now it finally all makes sense. So that's a marvelously wonderful prophecy of light body activation, going into a spiritual state of existence. There might be terror at first when it starts, but then immediately everything calms down. That's a beautiful one. And there's another one still. Look at this. This is about resurrection. On that timeless and transcendent day, again, this is the solar, there's a day of timelessness. Time suddenly stops. It's transcendent. And you experience a literal resurrection into a light body. Let's keep reading. And we will also not only get light bodies, but we will be shown clearly all the thoughts and actions of our lifetime. So they're talking about reincarnation. And that is now up to chapter 99, verse 4. So very clear prophecy that we will experience a light body activation, and now we will see all of our lifetimes. What have we done? Where have we gone? How far have we made it? All that stuff is now obvious to us. And the Law of One says we make the choice. We are the ones who decide if we progressed far enough or if we need to repeat the class. Nobody else is judging us. We do this ourselves because in that higher level, we know what we're working for and whether we attained it in this third-dimensional human realm or not. Now there's another one on the day of clarification. Let's take a look at this. How few human beings understand the intensity and the magnitude of this swiftly approaching day of clarification. Those who do not really comprehend the nature of the last day are impatient, and they would like to speed its arrival. Whereas those who know the immense power of the living truth stand in trembling awe before the dawning of this infinite day. And that is the Meditation on Holy Quran 42:7. So remember, here it's making another really interesting point that you wouldn't have gotten in the Old Testament, which is even if you know about this ascension, even if you believe that it's going to happen, you've done the homework, you've read the texts, you've done the science, and now in modern times at least, and you believe it's going to happen, I do see this a lot. I see people really impatient, and they say, David, this something out in modern times at least, and you believe it's going to happen. I do see this a lot. I see people really impatient, and they say, David, this something, why hasn't it happened yet? You said 2012 was it. Well, we thought 2012 was going to be it, because that is actually the mathematical end of the cycle. But apparently these giant spheres that Corey has been shown are holding back the sun so that it won't do this until we are ready, and it can therefore give us a few more extra years. So here they're saying, yeah, you want those extra years. You don't want this to happen right away. You want this to take place because this is very, very important. But you want to have the time to get ready for it. So it's great, actually, that we have probably at least 3 more years from the time that I'm doing this taping before this is going to happen. It gives everybody a chance to move forward. Now, here's another thing. This is the last one from the Quran I want to share with you, and then we're done with this episode, where they definitely do not create a religious fundamentalist ideology. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Look at this. It's amazing that this is in the Quran. If each spiritual nation practices faithfully the path revealed through its own holy prophets, then all humanity will return together to the source of love. And that's only in chapter 5, verse 51, right at the beginning, that it says, all you have to do is follow your own religion. Follow what the prophets of your religion really taught you. And everybody gets to go together to the source of love. We all go through this flash. It's not just people of a certain religious sect. It's not just people that practice Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism or whatever. If you practice it, we all go to the same place. And that, to me, is a very, very exciting thing. We all go to the same place. And that, to me, is a very, very exciting thing. So we have one more round of prophecies left before we get back into the science. And the science is very important because I'm going to be tying all of this together, all of these prophecies that you've now explored with me over many, many episodes. And I'm going to show you how the actual solar system changes support that with most cutting-edge data we can. It will become undeniable that the sun is going to do this. But before we get there, I want to start off by tying together all of the mysterious loose ends of Buddhism, how it comes out of Hinduism, what did Buddha actually teach about the solar flash, and how it then parallels with Tibetan Buddhism. So that's going to be very exciting, and it's our final launching pad before we go back into another round of scientific episodes that will help all of this root into your rational mind. I'm David Wilcock. This is Wisdom Teachings, bringing you the knowledge you need that will set you free. Thanks for watching.